Just make them up here. My name is Jeremy Borkadell. I'm a professor of
Let me
economics.
stop you one more time. Remember, you got a tax foundation policy. All right, that's what he's going to be working off of. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again. I'm Jeremy Borkadell. I'm a professor of economics at University of Central Arkansas in Conway. And Nicole Katie at Tax Foundation looked at some of the results and wrote up a short, just 5-page document just discussing the results and what we thought of them. And I looked through it as well and agreed with what Nicole said. So just very briefly say what we said. I don't have a PowerPoint here, and this will be pretty brief. But in large part, I think what their models say kind of confirm a lot of what we've been saying all along, which is that most of these tax cuts, especially if they're a net cut, will provide some increase in economic activity, some increase in employment, but they're not large enough that they're going to pay for the tax cuts, right? Which I think has been a concern, at least initially, that what came out of this task force might be something like what happened in Kansas, where they assumed we would pay for it. I think these models make it clear that that's not, and none of these proposals are like that. They're reasonable enough where they're going to cause some new economic activity, but are not going to cause any sort of large holes in the budget, at least ones that are planned, right? So when we talk about with the governor's proposal, $180 million tax cut, that's going to be $180 million less revenue or thereabouts, right? 173 less, 186, depending on the assumptions. But that can be planned for, right? That's, I think, the important thing is that the effects are known. I think the models show that the dynamic effects are not that different from the static effects, right? So even with the static estimates from DFNA, we already had a pretty good idea of what the budgetary impacts would be. So in that sense, we think that their models give us confirmation that what the task force has been talking about all along, focusing on income tax cuts, but recognizing the budgetary impact has been the right approach. I guess I'll just say maybe one area that we might disagree with them a little bit is on the relative impact of the cuts and how that's going to play out in terms of capital response to this. Right? So I think a lot of what their models look at is, we might call them a demand side model primarily. They're looking at, well, businesses will have more money to spend, so they might invest more, and individuals will have more money to spend, so they will spend more, as well as some people might move to the state as well, right? So there's kind of all those three things. Businesses will spend more, people will have more money in their pocket, they'll spend more, and some new people and businesses will come in. Where I think, the Tax Foundation has a model that they use primarily at the federal level, but where it, I think, differs from their model is there is a bigger assumption that cutting taxes on capital, so corporate tax rate, franchise tax, things like that would actually probably have a much bigger boost than they're suggesting. Again, the Tax Foundation doesn't have a model for Arkansas specifically, so that's, I think, why it's good to bring them in. But that's just where we might disagree with them, is to say that there might be some larger impacts on capital. So for example, to put this in real language, it's not just that, well, businesses will have more money so they can invest more, but it's that there might be an increase in productivity from the tax cuts, so that people will actually work more, be more productive. Businesses might have more capital available. More capital might be attracted rather than just people. So it's not just the increased spending, although certainly that effect would happen. But if we think their model underestimates anything, it would just be on the impact on capital, and so we think that that might say that the dynamic revenue losses would be even smaller than they might have suggested. But again, we don't want to oversell that and say that tax cuts are going to pay for themselves. I think no one has assumed that going along, and we certainly wouldn't say that either. But those are just kind of some of the broad level places where we agree with them and disagree. So I think really I just want to be here to see if anyone had any questions about. I'm sure you all had a chance to at least glance through Nicole's statement and just see if I can elaborate on anything there. But thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Questions?
So, again, it's awful hard to quantify and do what they've done as far as modeling these things, and we may disagree about the level of dynamic activity that's going to come as a result of these, but would you agree that it's a valid tool for comparing between the different plans, using those scenarios as they were laid out?
Yeah, I think it is a good way to compare between the different plans, right? Look at, the governor's plan only cuts the top rate, whereas the other two proposals, because there's some consolidation of brackets, there might be cuts to different groups. So I think it is a useful tool for comparison, even if, the absolute levels might differ if you have different assumptions. But I think to compare between the different plans, it is a useful tool, yes.
Senator Bielowitz, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at basically a sentence in your conclusion where you write, while tax cuts do not generally pay for themselves, it is accepted within the economic literature that reforms can be programmed, not necessarily are, but can be. So I want to refer back to the question that was posed by Senator Kingsford earlier, based on the history of our being pretty robust with tax cuts. Do you have any information about what the performance has been in our state historically that could inform what we might expect now in our deliberations?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, as they alluded to, you can try to model this, how the past tax cuts impacted economic growth or job growth, but it's really hard to do because you never have the counterfactual. You always only have, did you or didn't you cut taxes, and what was the reality? So it's always going to be a modeling assumption of what would have happened without the tax cuts. So I think it's a little hard to say. I think what I would emphasize is that a lot of the tax cuts in recent years haven't been tax cuts that would very directly impact capital, would impact business activity. They've been cutting rates for people in the middle, and the new one coming up will cut for people at the bottom. Those are cuts that are probably going to more impact personal spending rather than business investment. The only really capital cuts recently would be things like the capital gains exclusions, but those probably don't have a direct immediate impact on capital. So I guess I wouldn't have any more information than they would about what the impact of past tax cuts have been, because you always only have what happened with what changes you made.
And if we look at these different scenarios, and it appears to me over the years, we're relying, I don't know if extraordinarily heavily, but it strikes me very heavily on spending, therefore sales tax as I think a rather large sum of money that we're expecting to run our government and do the kind of things we need to do. I know there are varying thoughts about sales tax being regressive and hurting the folks the most who have the least. And then on the other side, people say, well, it's really equal because everybody's a consumer and everybody's paying for their consumptions. So over the years in states that do rely heavily on sales taxes, has that proven to be a model pretty much that where I guess the benefit has accrued to all of the population in a more equitable fashion that you would say is progressive rather than regressive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll try to say two things. One about Arkansas specifically, and one just about general economic research on types of taxes. So I think in Arkansas, what we've definitely seen over the years is an increasing reliance on the sales tax for a variety of reasons. One being it's one sales tax, it's one tax that the legislature can raise on their own without requiring supermajorities or a constitutional amendment. So that's one reason. And also since 1981, that counties and then cities now can, by simple majority votes, can increase the sales tax. So I think because of those two factors, that has led to Arkansas probably relying on sales tax much more so than other taxes. And we see that with now the rate being, within a few tenths of a percentage point of the highest in the nation if you average across cities and counties. So that's the Arkansas brief history, which you all know, but I think that's good to emphasize that. But if we look at what sorts of taxes are going to lead to economic growth generally, a lot of the research, and some of it Nicole cites in our paper here, including work from the OECD research arm, shows that the worst tax taxes for, if you're worried about economic growth, that's your only concern. The worst taxes are first corporate income taxes and then personal income taxes. The ones that affect growth the least are property taxes, and then sales falls towards the lower end as well. So that's on growth overall. Now I know that we're also interested in what's the impact on different groups, right, as far as it being progressive or not. And so that's a separate question from what's the impact on the overall growth rate. I think it's certainly true that in general sales tax is going to be more regressive, right? That people on the low end are going to spend more of their budget, and ITEP talked a lot about that at the last meeting, and certainly that's true. Although I would caution, and as ITEP acknowledges as well, not every increase in the sales tax, for example, by expanding the sales tax base to services, is necessarily regressive. In fact, ITEP and Tax Foundation agree on this, that expanding the sales tax base, say, to services, actually makes it a little more progressive, because that's what high-income people spend a lot more of their income on. Those are things that I think, as far as you guys are concerned, we've moved past, what sales tax exemptions are going to change. So again, I think it's important just to think back to that when we think about progressive versus progressive.
Well, I think the question for us as legislators as well is, obviously we pass the sales tax because that's the easiest thing to do. But the easiest thing to do while we're in this deliberation is the easiest thing to do. With good policy is the question I would pose for us. And we had a lot of discussion concerning the earned income tax credit earlier. And please don't quote me as getting back into the discussion on groceries, people. When we are comparing, is it better to have more money as a result of the earned income tax credit and not lower the taxes on groceries, for example, continue to lower that? But in some ways, I always wrestle with if that is maybe red herring, maybe overstating it, but is it really a matter of it's just one or the other when we come to good tax policy? Because if we are going to look at this in terms of equity, which I gather that's probably not what we're doing, if we're going to look at our tax policy in terms of equity, not equality, I think that moves us somewhere to something other than just growth. And that's the issue with which I wrestle. Should all of what we do be based just on growth? For example, if we consider the earned income tax credit, there needs to be an offset someplace else. And that sounds really, and it is really a really equal way to look at it. But is it an equitable way to look at what we're doing when it comes to tax policy? That is a question I'm wrestling with, because I don't assume that every increase on sales tax is a bad thing. But I think the way we're doing it probably does not consider anything much outside of growth. Is that, according to OECD and everybody else, is that what most other countries or even other states, or do they simply look at pro-growth more than they look at pro-equity? Is that kind of where the world is or not?